One of the most important parts of being a prepper is making sure that you and your loved ones have enough water stored. That includes having water that you are going to use for drinking, as well as water that you can use for other things like cleaning and cooking. Today we're going to be going over how to have a diversified water storage plan that'll ensure that you and your loved ones have water, whether you're able to bug in at home or if you have to bug out and maybe leave some of your supplies behind. Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I see preppers make, and it's not just in the area of water storage, but it's putting all of your chickens in one basket. So for water storage, it might be something like maybe you have water stored in 55-gallon drums, but you don't have water stored in things that maybe you could take with you in case you have to bug out. So for me and my family's water storage plan, I have broken it down kind of into different levels or layers. And it starts with the most basic. It's stuff that everybody could do, whether you live in an apartment or you have a limited budget. And then also as you go on, then we could look at things that maybe you could use if you had more space. Maybe like those 55-gallon drums, or if you had a larger piece of property, maybe you could put cisterns in. So today we're going to be talking about those levels. And the first level or layer of my family's water storage plan is just pre-packaged water bottles. Now, given that should not be the backbone of your family's water storage plan, but I think it's a good place to start, especially if you're on a budget or if you don't have a lot of space to store things. They're cheap. You can take them with you if you have to bug out. You can break them down real easily. And then also, if you're in a situation where you want to be generous to somebody, then you can hand those water bottles out, because if you're just passing out a few water bottles, then that doesn't really necessarily tell people that you have a whole bunch of water. Like if you were to be waddling across, the street with a couple of aquatainers or something like that, you just hand out a bottle of water. Maybe that doesn't, I guess, betray how much you actually have. And as far as quantities go, I think having a couple of weeks of water stored that way isn't a bad idea. Like my family, I think we try to have somewhere between 2 and 4 packages of water bottles stored at all times. And we rotate through that because really those are not designed at all for long-term storage. I think at a max, maybe you want to have them for about a year, because those bottles, they're not all that tough. They do start to wear out pretty easily, especially if you have them stacked on top of each other. They won't be able to hold that weight forever, and then you'll start to have leaks and things like that. But that'll just give you a good head start, so maybe you don't have to use up your other stored water. And really, if you have water for a couple of weeks, that's going to keep you covered in most situations. Now, if you're worried about something a little bit more long-term, then of course, bottled water isn't going to get you very far at all. But for most of the things that you're going to deal with, unless Russia just goes absolutely crazy, then it should cover you for things like weather events and stuff like that. And also, one thing I like about water bottles is that if you're creative, you can use them in a few different ways. Like I showed in a previous video how you can just poke a hole in the top of a little plastic water bottle lid and then use that to rinse off your toothbrush. And that'll help save some of your water instead of just taking the cap off and dumping the whole bottle on it. And then also other things you can do that are similar to that. You can poke a few holes in the top of a bottle, and you can have something that you can use to water seedlings, because those seedlings, their roots aren't really established yet, and if you're just spraying and dumping a whole bunch of water on it, then you could damage that root system or at least disturb it. Whereas, if you just are squeezing a little bit of water on it, you have kind of like, I guess, a mini watering can made out of a bottle, then you'll be okay. And also, you can use that same concept to do things like irrigate wounds. If you have a cut or something like that, one of the worst things that you can do is to let dirt and other things just stay in there and fester. So you can use a water bottle, some holes in the top of it, spray that out, and that's another good use. Now, other types of bottled water are going to be things like those 1-gallon jugs. And one thing I do not recommend storing at all is the milk jug style containers, because they're really weak, they're really flimsy, they will blow up without much pressure on them at all. I had several rupture. I think it was every single one of them that I had ruptured and leaked until it was empty. I had no idea that it happened. So if you're going to do something like that, I recommend storing things like this style of gallon container. The plastic is going to be much tougher, and when you store water in those, one thing that I like to store like this is going to be distilled water. Now, you're not really going to be drinking that, but if you have things like humidifiers or diffusers, then that is a better type of water to use in those. So that'll help keep you ready in case you or your loved ones get sick with something like a cough or cold or something like that. I think the next level of your water storage plan should be portable water containers. Those usually hold between 3 and 7 gallons each. I've done several different videos where I feature those, so I won't go into too great a detail of them here. I'll be sure to put a card up top where you can go take a look at some of those, but some good examples are going to be things like the water brick, the Aquatainer, and the Scepter military water can, and there's a bunch out there. But the advantage of those is you're going to be able to store water for a longer period of time in those than maybe you would water bottles. They tend to, especially in the case with like the military water can, they're not going to let light pass through them, so algae isn't going to build up in them all that much. They're going to be more durable than, say, water bottles, and they're also reusable. So if there's a situation where maybe it is a little bit longer term and you need to go out and gather water, then maybe you can use those. Just be sure that you know which ones have had the dirty water in them, which ones have had the clean water in them. Like, say, what my family and I might do, we might use the military water cans to go out and obtain water, purify it, and then use the Aquatainers to store them, since they have a very easy to use spigot that already comes with it. You don't have to buy it separately. And one good thing about having portable water containers is it's kind of similar to having the water bottles, is that if you have to bug out, then you can take that with you. And then also you can use them if maybe you do have larger bulk style containers, then you can move some water from like your 55-gallon barrel over to something like an Aquatainer, and then use that Aquatainer in the house. So having things like those portable water containers, they just give you a little bit more flexibility in your water storage. And then what I consider to be, I guess, level 2A of a water storage plan is going to be last ditch water storage containers. These are things that you don't really keep full of water on a normal basis just because it's not all that practical to do so, but they are things that you could quickly fill with water if you knew that there was some sort of weather event or other disaster type situation that would be heading your way. So examples of, I guess, last ditch water containers would be things like the Aquapod or the Water Bob. And those are basically big bladders that you put inside of your bathtub, fill them up, and it helps keep that water cleaner than if you were to just fill your bathtub with water. And another good thing that does, in addition to keeping the water clean and not allowing microorganisms to grow in them and mess everything up, is that it also prevents insects from accessing that water. Like where I'm at, especially in the summer, mosquitoes are a big problem. And the last thing I want is part of my water or my emergency water supply to be infested with mosquitoes and have a little swamp inside of my house. I don't want that at all. So having something like an Aquapod or a Water Bob, that would allow me to store a large amount of water inside of my home, and it would be safe from, I guess, outside contamination. And then kind of some smaller examples of last-ditch water storage containers would be things like collapsible water jugs like you would take camping. I have a couple made by Reliance that have lasted a very long time. They're still in good shape. They're not nearly as flimsy as you would think they would be. Maybe some of y'all might have had some bad examples with them, but I've had some pretty positive experiences with mine. And then also other things, pretty much anything that you have laying around the house. Things like 5-gallon buckets, especially if they are food safe, can be used to store water if they're clean. And then even non-food safe 5-gallon buckets can be used to store water, and you can use that for things like washing, and then also for flushing your toilet, which that could be a pretty big deal. And then things like water pitchers or anything else that you have in your kitchen that you would use to either cook with or hold water or hold beverages. You can use those to store water as well. I don't know if, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the movie The Road. during the opening scenes, you don't really know exactly what is happening. But the husband, he's, gathering all like the, big bowls and stuff like that in the kitchen and filling them with water, because he knows that it's only a matter of time before their water utilities go out. So that's always a good thing to do if you know something is coming your way. And the next level of a good water storage plan is going to be those larger bulk containers. Those are going to be things like 55-gallon drums, IBC totes. Usually the most common ones, I think, of those are 275 gallons. And then even larger things like cisterns, which can be buried underground. Now, there are a couple of things to watch out for when you are selecting these types of containers. And the first one is, if you are considering buying one that has been used, you need to know exactly what has been stored in those. Some of y'all out there, y'all are going to want to have a good deal because funds are low, which I completely understand. So y'all might want to consider maybe looking into those used containers. But like I said, make sure that no chemicals have been stored in there, because even though we don't think of plastic as porous, those things can be permanently contaminated if the wrong thing was stored in them. And then also, even if you're buying these things new, you need to make sure that what you are purchasing is made of food-safe materials. There are a lot of larger containers out there that are designed to hold things like pesticides. I'm sure that y'all have been, driving out on the highway, and then you pass by like a flatbed truck, and then they have a large water container in the back, and it has some sort of chemical in it. Well, those are probably folks that, go out, maybe they spray pesticides, herbicides, or maybe that's filled with fertilizer. And containers like that don't need to be food safe. And you notice that a lot of those containers are going to be somewhat transparent. I mean, usually it's made out of some sort of, white plastic that you can still see through a little bit. And the issue with containers like that is, if light is passing through that is going to help algae to grow. So the best water containers are going to be those that are made out of like that blue plastic. It's not going to let as much light pass through. Whoo! Struggling today, y'all. Then, like, if you're going to get things like IBC totes that are brand new, a lot of those, they are food safe, but I know City Prepping, he did a video a while back where he showed how he wrapped his IBC tote in like a black tarp to reduce the amount of light that would pass through that to kind of slow down the algae growth, which I think that is a great idea. And I'm just going to be 100% honest with y'all. I don't have the space for storing water in that way yet, but one thing I would like to do, and I would like to show y'all hopefully within the next few months or next several months, would be integrating a rainwater harvesting system into my home. And that is a great way to utilize things like those 55-gallon drums. And it doesn't have to be the blue ones. I know that there are some more, aesthetically pleasing ones out there. Maybe if you live in an area where maybe you live somewhere with an HOA and having, those ugly blue barrels might be frowned upon. There are things that look like, planters or things like that you can tie into a rainwater harvesting system. So that's something I would like to do. And I mean, rainwater harvesting systems, those, they can use just those normal barrels, or you can even integrate underground cisterns into that so that you can have a large amount of water for things like plants in addition to drinking if you need to do that. Now, the thing with rainwater harvesting, and along with other water that maybe has been stored outside for a couple months or more, is that you might want to filter that. So having something like a Berkey is always a good idea. And of course, with rainwater, birds do this thing called pooping. So you definitely want to filter anything that has been in your roof and in your nasty, slimy gutters or anything like that. Then there's also other water sources that you either do have at your home or you may have nearby. And one of those is going to be in your hot water heater. There's still going to be some hot water in there, even if maybe the plumbing isn't working, that you can access from the little spigot at the bottom. And then if you have something like a swimming pool or maybe like a koi pond in the backyard, then you can run that water through some sort of filter depending on what water you have, what types of chemical treatments have been used. And at the very least, that could probably be used for things like toilet flushing, certain types of cleaning, and then things like that. And also, be aware of the water sources that you have around your home, even beyond just your yard. Does your neighbor have a pond? Maybe you have a pond, like a stock pond that you keep fish in. Are there any lakes nearby, any streams? And while you definitely want to have plenty of water stored so where you don't have to rely on things like that you might end up in a situation where you do need them, and it's always good to know where those things are and have a way to filter and purify water from those sources. A while back, I did a video over how to purify water during a long-term, really bad disaster, and you can find that by clicking here. Y'all have a good one. Thanks again.